What's going on? Marcus Johnson stood at the corner of 125th Street and Lenox Avenue, his eyes scanning the bustling Harlem neighborhood he'd called home for 25 years. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and the air hummed with car horns, animated conversations, and distant sirens. A familiar feeling of unease settled in his chest as he watched his community in motion. It wasn't that Marcus didn't love his neighborhood, he did fiercely. Lately, though, it felt like the very fabric of his community was fraying at the edges. The problems that had always existed seemed to be intensifying at an alarming rate: poverty, drug abuse, police brutality, and a pervasive sense of hopelessness among the youth. These were the challenges that Marcus and his community were up against. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to change, and it needed to change now. But he felt powerless in the face of such overwhelming challenges. Lost in thought, he stood there, and a commotion down the street caught his attention. A group of young men were arguing loudly, their voices rising with each heated exchange. Marcus recognized them. They were barely out of high school, caught up in the allure of easy money and street cred. He'd seen this scene play out too often, and knew it rarely ended well. Without thinking, Marcus found himself walking towards the group. As he approached, he could see the tension in their body language, the way their hands clenched into fists at their sides. One of the young men, a tall, lanky kid named Jamal, noticed Marcus and called out, "Yo, Mr. J. Tell these fools what's up." Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of expectations settle on his shoulders. He'd earned a reputation in the neighborhood as someone who could be trusted, someone who'd managed to navigate the pitfalls of growing up in Harlem without succumbing to the streets. But then, he wasn't sure he had the words to defuse the situation. "What's going on here, fellas?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice calm and neutral. The group erupted into a cacophony of accusations and explanations, each trying to talk over the other. Marcus held up his hands, silencing them with a gesture. "One at a time," he said firmly. "Jamal, you start." As Jamal began to explain the dispute, something about territory and respect, Marcus found his mind drifting to a conversation he'd had with his father just a few days earlier. His dad, a Vietnam veteran who'd seen more than his fair share of conflict, had shared his growing concern about the state of their community and the world at large. "It's like history is repeating itself," his father had said, his eyes distant with memories. "The same mistakes, the same conflicts, just with different faces. When will we learn?" Marcus nodded, understanding all too well what his father meant. The issues plaguing their community weren't new, they were the same battles that had been fought for generations. And yet, here they were, still grappling with the same problems. As Jamal finished speaking, Marcus looked at each young man in turn. He saw anger in their eyes, but beneath that, he recognized something else: fear, uncertainty, and a desperate need for guidance. "Listen," Marcus began, choosing his words carefully. "I hear you. All of you. And I understand why you're angry. But let me ask you something: what's going on here? Is this dispute worth risking your lives over?" The young men shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Marcus pressed on, "We've got real problems in this neighborhood, problems that affect all of us. But fighting amongst ourselves isn't going to solve anything. It's just going to make things worse." One of the other young men, a stocky kid named Deshawn, spoke up. "So, what are we supposed to do, Mr. J? Just sit back and take it while everything falls apart around us?" Marcus shook his head. "No, that's not what I'm saying at all. We need to take action, but we need to take the right action. We need to unite as a community, not tear each other apart." As Marcus spoke, he felt a spark of inspiration. Maybe this was the moment he'd been waiting for, a chance to make a real difference. "Look," he continued, "what if we, as a community, channel all this energy into something positive? Something that could make a change in our neighborhood. We have the power to transform our community for the better." This emphasis on the collective power of the community can inspire the audience to take action. The young men looked skeptical, but they were listening. Marcus took that as a good sign and pressed on. "I've been thinking about starting a community outreach program. Something to give the kids around here a safe place to go after school, maybe some tutoring, job training, that kind of thing. But I can't do it alone. I need help from people who know what it's like on the streets." Jamal's eyes widened with interest. "You serious, Mr. J? You think we could do something like that?" Marcus nodded emphatically. "I know we can. But it's going to take all of us working together. No more fighting over turf or respect. We need to respect ourselves and our community first." As Marcus spoke, he could see the tension in the group starting to dissipate. Looks of curiosity replaced the angry expressions and, dare he hope, excitement. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. Over the next few weeks, Marcus threw himself into bringing his vision to life. He reached out to local businesses, churches, and community leaders, sharing his idea for a youth center to provide a haven and opportunities for the neighborhood's young people. To his surprise and delight, Jamal, Deshawn, and the other young men he'd confronted that day on the street became his most enthusiastic supporters. They spread the word among their peers, recruited volunteers, and even helped clean up an abandoned storefront that would serve as their base of operations. Their actions were not just a show of support, but a testament to the power of collective action in bringing about positive change. As word of the project spread, more and more people came forward to offer support. A retired teacher volunteered to run tutoring sessions. A local chef offered to teach cooking classes. Even the skeptical owner of the corner bodega donated snacks and drinks for the kids who would be attending after-school programs. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were setbacks and obstacles along the way. Funding was always tight, and there were those in the community who doubted that a bunch of street kids could make a difference. Marcus worked long hours, juggling his day job with his commitment to the youth center. There were moments when he questioned whether he was in over his head. But every time he felt like giving up, something would happen to renew his determination. For the day, he overheard Jamal telling a younger kid, "Man, this center is going to be lit. No more hanging on the corner and getting into trouble. We're going to have a real place to go, you feel me?" Or the afternoon, Deshawn's mother stopped him on the street, tears in her eyes, to thank him for giving her son a sense of purpose. "I was so worried about him," she confessed. "But now, it's like he's a different person. He's talking about going back to school, maybe even college." As the weeks turned into months, Marcus began to see fundamental changes in his community. The youth center, which they'd named New Directions, became a hub of activity and hope. Crime rates in the immediate area dropped, as more young people found alternatives to street life. However, the most significant change was in the community's attitude. People who had long been resigned to the status quo began to believe that positive change was possible. They started taking more pride in their neighborhood, organizing cleanup days and neighborhood watch programs. One evening, about 6 months after the confrontation that had started it all, Marcus stood outside the youth center watching as a group of kids played basketball on the newly installed court. Jamal and Deshawn were there too, coaching the younger kids and keeping score. As he observed the scene, Marcus felt a presence beside him. He turned to see his father, a proud smile on his face. "You've done good, son," his father said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Real good." Marcus shook his head modestly. "It wasn't just me, Dad. It was all of us working together." His father nodded sagely. "That's the way it should be. That's how real change happens." As they stood there in companionable silence, watching the next generation at play, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. He thought about the challenges they'd faced and overcome, and the challenges still ahead. But he felt genuinely optimistic about the future, for the first time in a long while. He realized that the question he'd been asking himself for so long, "What's going on?" wasn't just an expression of despair. It was a call to action, a challenge to look beyond the surface and address the root causes of their community's problems. And in answering that call, they discovered something powerful: the strength that comes from unity, the hope that's born from taking action, and the profound change that's possible when people come together for a common cause. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the bustling youth center, Marcus smiled to himself. They still had a long way to go, but were on the right path. As long as they kept asking critical questions and working together to find answers, there was no limit to what they could achieve. The sound of laughter and friendly competition filled the air, starkly contrasting the tension and anger that had once dominated these streets. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace. "This," he thought, "is what's going on. This is the change we've been waiting for." As he watched the young people of his community, once divided, now united, Marcus knew that they were writing a new chapter in their neighborhood's history, a chapter filled with hope, unity, and the unwavering belief that together they could create a better future for all.